Welcome to the AFI Poetry Workshop hosted by me. I'm really excited about this workshop because I feel like poetry has so many things that you can do with it. So I'm just going to go over like a little overview of what I'm going to talk about today. So I wanted to like bridge the gap between theater and poetry because they're really not as different as you might think. Another thing I'm talking about is using poetry as a tool in both a professional and personal setting. And then I have a few BIPOC, like influential poet playwrights, exercise, not physical, only writing, and then like a sharing discussion. But bridging the gap, I wanted to talk about, obviously, poetry and theater have very similar roots. William Shakespeare, as we all know, has a bunch of poetry within his writing, rhetorical devices, figurative language, using blank verse, prose, rhyming couplets. Some people are like, oh, I'm not good at poetry. Lies. If you're a theater artist, there's no way that you're not good at poetry. Like, it's literally not true. So I know some people journal, which is a great creative release. And I think poetry can be seen as journaling. I had a talk with my mom where she was like, yeah, I was just writing down my thoughts, and she read them to me, and I was like, Mom, that's a poem. And she was like, it's just my thoughts. So actually poetry really might not be how you're interpreting it to be. It's not all about rhyming or doing all that fancy stuff. It could just simply be your thoughts. And also I thought it was cool that theater and poetry are like both intertwined with like visceral images. And though with poetry it's more infused in the writing, I still feel like that is a common ground between the two. So using poetry for you, I hope this workshop is going to help you figure out what you want to do with poetry and like how it can be a tool for yourself, whether that's personal, professional, or little bits of both. So personally for me, I'm using it as the little sliver of the mix right there. Where I was writing poetry for myself, I realized that, other people can get a lot from that. So if you're comfortable with that, I think that's great. And even if you're writing like, this is my thoughts, this is for me, and this is helping me, I think that's also a great release, because as artists, it's hard because theater can't be our release all the time anymore because it's the job. So I think poetry is a great kind of tool that you can use, whether you do take it and you're like, I'm going to do my own poetry film or choreo poem or poetic play, or you say, this is for myself. I think it's awesome in that way. So this is Ntozake Shange. She wrote for Color Girls. She passed away a few years ago, but she really paved the way. A very inspirational African-American playwright. I saw this article where a bunch of playwrights like Dominique Morisseau, Lynn Nottage, Alicia Harris were just talking about how impactful her work is for Black women in theater. So this is just something, I just like pieced it together in like 2-minute clip, but it's actually 11 minutes, where some Black professors are talking about how she took words and like infused her vernacular and kind of took it out of this Eurocentric realm of writing, which I thought was really interesting, and it kind of shows the boundless limits that poetry has. So this little quote I got is Alicia Harris, who wrote Is God Is and What to Send Up When It Goes Down, which are both great plays. I have the PDF if you need them, they're awesome. But she is the Obie Award-winning author of Is God Is, and she was actually also a performance poet before she became a playwright. So I thought this was a cool quote to share of what she said about Ntozake Shange. She said, "She's given me so much permission to be unapologetic, to talk about my pain and my joy. I've certainly been a color girl who's considered suicide, so just the title, everything, it feels like you are here, I affirm you, you exist, and you should exist loudly." And I just thought that was a really beautiful quote, especially about and it like shows the range of what poetry can do in speaking and writing. It can intertwine so much pain, and I think and joy. And I think as humans, we do a lot of that in our daily lives. Like, we laugh a lot at very traumatic events to help us cope. And I think through writing, it's really beautiful. So here are some other contemporary Black poet playwrights. We have Erica Dickerson Dispenza, who I love. She is a Black feminist poet playwright from Chicago, and she wrote a water tetralogy, which is basically like 4 plays like in the same vein. And they examined water as a reflection of Black women's bodies as sites of consciousness development and exile during key events in Black history. So it's really interesting. She's also writing a 10-play cycle about Hurricane Katrina. And one of the ones she wrote currently already was Hieroglyph. But she's really interesting. I highly recommend checking out her work. She is on New Play Exchange, and also you can like DM her or like follow her on Instagram, and she will respond to you. She's very, very awesome. The other playwright I have, poet playwright, is Marcus Gardley. He is from Oakland, California, and the New Yorker compared him to Federico Garcia Lorca, Pirandello, and Tennessee Williams, and I thought that was really cool. He wrote a play. I think it's called The House That Will Not Stand, but he wrote it in the similar vein to Federico Garcia Lorca's The House of Bernardo Alba, except he wrote it about free women of color. So it was really interesting to see that shift of perspective. Honorable mention, I have Alicia Harris, because I think she's awesome, and we were talking about her in acting and directing history, and also the fact that she was a poet first, and you can kind of see that interwoven into her writing. This short clip is Marcus Gardley talking about how he like went from poetry into theater. So I hope you have a pen or pencil and paper, or you have a Google Doc. I prefer pencil and paper because I think it's really important to make contact with something as we have no contact, and it's really good to just get off the computer sometimes and just be with something in the present moment. So we're gonna write 5 to 7 minutes. It's gonna have this timer start, and you just free write. If people are like, I don't know what to write about, I don't know how to write a poem, something that can kind of guide you is, I would say, write about something that you may be struggling with during this time, whether that's the pandemic itself, not being around people, Black Lives Matter. A lot of issues are coming to the forefront, so I know we're holding in a lot of tension. It's very hard to like release and have conversations because we're not all around each other. So I think poetry is a good way to like release that. And this could just be your thoughts. It doesn't have, it could be written like Dear Journal. It doesn't matter. If you consider it to be poetry, then it is poetry. So we're gonna just write, starting now.
Ryan Little.